Welcome to Barnyard Language, honest talk about running farms and raising families. We are Katie and Arlene, an Iowa sheep farmer and an Ontario dairy farmer, with 6 kids, 2 husbands, and a whole lot of chaos between us.
While this is a podcast for farm families, sometimes our content isn't for the whole family. So kick off your boots, reheat your coffee, and join us for some Barnyard Language.
Welcome to another episode of Barnyard Language. I can hear roosters outside the window, so I know Katie is back from New York City. We're both back on the farm. So Katie, what was up in New York? What's happening now that you're back home? What is your update this week?
New York was very loud. The people are kinder than anticipated. I enjoyed the city more than anticipated. I ate way too much, including I forgot to mention this in our foreshortened first attempt at this update, Arlene, where we did the whole update and then realized that it hadn't recorded and my camera wasn't working. But here we are now. Went to a cafe across the street from our hotel that offers something called a cake and shake, which is indeed a full-size milkshake with a massive slice of cheesecake on top. I did not order one. Several of my coworkers did. It was one of the most horrifying things I've ever seen.
Okay, so logistics. Are you eating the cake first? Are you dipping the cake in the milkshake? How are you doing this?
The standard approach seems to be to get a side plate and simply remove the slice of cake from the top and consume it alongside.
Right.
But they coat the whole outside of the glass in toppings for like the first top 4 inches of the glass, and then they put whipped cream and cherries on top of the cake, and it's a whole thing.
Right. So it's not really something you can eat while like walking down the street, for example.
It's not really something you can eat seated at a table. Yeah. But it was worth it for the entertainment value, if nothing else. We got to witness the heroics of the New York City Fire Department when one of our coworkers and several other innocent people got trapped in a hotel elevator for well over 2 hours.
Ooh, that's exciting.
Yeah, thankfully for the entertainment value, it was also one of those glass elevators that, looks out over
Oh no.
the atrium of the hotel, and it was stuck just above the lobby level. So
you could mock them while they were in their glass cage?
yes, I now have a new phobia, because the only thing worse than being stuck in an elevator with a bunch of strangers for several hours is people staring at you while you're stuck in an elevator for several hours with a bunch of strangers.
That is terrifying.
And the firemen all brought axes, which I'm not quite sure. I feel like maybe that's just like a standard, like, we left the truck, we have to bring axes, but I don't know what their plan was, if they were going to like chop through the door or...
Right, smash the glass.
And even in New York City, it takes an astoundingly long time to assemble the people you need to extricate folks from a stuck elevator, because there were...
A suspended glass cage.
Yeah, and I mean, they were still... The lobby of the hotel is on the 8th floor, so they were not at ground level. It was not like they could just pop the door and walk out. Like, they were still 90 feet in the air or whatever. So, yeah. And there were elderly folks in there, and someone started having a medical emergency, and it was a whole thing. Thankfully, everyone seems to have made it through okay.
Yeah. That is some excitement that it's better to observe than to be part of.
Definitely.
Yes. And how was the travel part of things? Because I know you're not super close to an airport, so sometimes things take a while to get to and from.
It is a 3-hour drive to the Minneapolis airport, which I found out I can actually expense, and I can expense the hotel that I stayed in the night before because I had a 7 a.m. flight, and ain't nobody driving 3 hours to be at the airport at 5 a.m. Not me, anyway. On the trip home, I picked up 2 orphaned baby skunks that I brought home to my overstimulated children right at bedtime when I was also vastly overstimulated.
Seems like a solid choice.
Yeah, I thought so. They are now out of my bathtub. My children and the skunks. Nobody is in the bathtub at this moment.
Did they bathe together?
I should have. I think the skunks were probably less smelly, but the skunks went to a professional wildlife rescue yesterday where they will be well attended to and taught to be skunks, um, which is good. I have some real cute video of them eating hard boiled eggs in my bathtub. They're very enthusiastic eaters. I actually washed the skunks' faces before I took them to the rescue because both of them had egg in their ears and it didn't seem like it would make the best first impression.
I feel like we're always discovering ways that Katie and I are different. And I would say that this is a clear example of one because I cannot imagine a scenario where I would have be washing baby skunks' faces or having baby skunks in my house at all.
In, well, not defense, I guess, of my thoughts about what would make the best first impression, they promptly sprayed the volunteers at the animal rescue when they were removing them from the cat carrier, thereby answering whether or not they were old enough to spray. Indeed, they were, and whether my plying them with tuna and eggs had kept me safe from being sprayed, which apparently it had. The poor young.
I'm impressed that your kids didn't get sprayed because they are an enthusiastic pair, from what I know of them.
They were allowed to give each skunk a one finger touch when we brought them in, and that was it because what discretion being the better part of valor, skunks are a disease vector for a lot of things that I don't want my children exposed to. You know, many of which they're already exposed to living on the farm, but still, it.
And you probably didn't want the skunks to spray in your house.
Yeah, that too. My car doesn't smell great, which is unfortunate because we're going on vacation in 3 days on a road trip in my car that smells like skunks. But I needed to get the car cleaned out real well anyway, so.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure it'll clear right out. And I don't even know if I should ask anymore because I'm afraid that Jim's listening and he's going to make him cry. But what is the crop report, Katie?
Chances of my husband crying are probably pretty good. Let's just put it that way.
Right. So I'm guessing more rain and less, not more planting.
More rain, not more planting. Very, very busy at his town job. And of course, probably the best weather we've had all spring will be while we're on vacation. So, Jim, if you're hearing this on the day it comes out, I do give you permission to skip vacation. I get it. I do. I actually thought about canceling the vacation, and then a friend that we're going on vacation with texted me like 5 minutes later and was like, I'm so excited. My whole family's so excited to go on vacation with you guys. And I was like, well, shit. Guess we're going on vacation. But seriously, dear, if getting me and the kids out of here is helpful, I will just do it because I understand.
Ah, the farm comes first. Blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. It's not even so much a matter of the farm coming first, but I, as a person who also gets very involved in my work and gets very stressed out when I can't get it done.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, how was your week, Arlene?
Well, I didn't go somewhere quite as exciting as New York City, but I did get to go away.
Hey, small town Canada's still fun.
That's right. Rimbey, Alberta is a hotspot.
The small town that never sleeps.
Well, the one thing that we knew but had kind of forgot till we got there was how much further north we were going. And you have a hard time sleeping because the sun stays up forever. So, yeah, we were not really prepared for both the time difference and the fact that the sun wasn't going to set till after 10 o'clock at night. So that was a bit of a shock, but thankful for blackout curtains. That helps a bit. Yeah, so my husband got a judging job in Rimbey, Alberta. So we flew in and out of Edmonton to go there. I didn't really have anything to do, but, his rental car was paid for. The hotel was paid for, his flight. So it was like, well, why not just tack one more person on while we're going? And then it's more fun. So it was fun. We looked around Edmonton a bit. For the Canadian fans, we were not there during a hockey game, which was a bit disappointing. It would have been Game 7 if the Oilers had made it to Game 7, but they won before Game 7. So we didn't participate in the street parties that happened during the Oilers games. So very exciting for all of our Alberta Edmonton Oilers fans. Yeah, I went to a bunch of Western wear stores because there's a lot of them there, and there are not very many or any near where I live. So I did a bunch of mostly just looking at things, but I did buy a couple of Father's Day presents for my husband and a couple of cute shirts for my daughter since we were in those kind of venues, and watched a cow show because what is a trip without a cow show? And yeah, did a lot of driving.
I have to say that from a relaxation standpoint, I am a huge proponent of, I don't want to say going to boring places, but going to places where there is perhaps a lower expectation of how many things you might see and do. You know, New York City is definitely not the place to go for there's nothing to see and do. Where Rimby, Alberta,
Yeah,
perhaps
and there was an antique truck museum, which I regret to inform you I did not go to. So I mean, if we go back someday, I will fit that into my day. And we got to meet up with a university friend when we were in Edmonton, which was pretty fun. We went to a restaurant called Meat, so you can guess what's on the menu. Katie also tipped me off to the fact that she also went to a restaurant with meat in the name when she was in New York.
I did. We went to a Korean barbecue restaurant in Koreatown in New York City called Let's Meat, where they cook on a burner at your table, and they bring just huge platters of thin sliced ribeye and brisket and teriyaki chicken and vegetables and mysterious sauces. I don't know that I have ever eaten that much that quickly. Even I managed to use chopsticks enough to put food in my face, which anyone who has seen my general level of coordination can envision how that went. Also, because of the nature of the way things are cooked, if you don't eat fast enough, the employee who is cooking at your table will just come back and scoop stuff off the burner and dump it on your plate, and you will be expected to eat it, which is truly one of those hardships that must be endured in life. And the restaurant, Arlene, I sent you a picture, but it was called Let's Meet, which I thought was lovely.
Yes. And ours was just meat. So there's no question about what's on the menu there for sure.
I will admit that I have a real fondness for places where the name and the decor leaves nothing to be inferred about what is happening.
Yes, that is right.
You know, it's nice.
Yeah. And then got back home. My number 3 had his music recital this weekend. He's been playing drums, so we got to listen to him play. And he just started in January, and we do not have a drum set in our house. So I've never actually heard him play because I drop him off for lessons and I go for a walk around the neighborhood and then I come back. So it was pretty fun to actually hear him perform. And same kid also tried out or auditioned for a play this weekend. So I'm excited that he's getting brave and trying new things. So that's some exciting stuff. So, Katie, after all the excitement of this past week, maybe we should go ahead and introduce our guest for this week.
I think we should because Arlene, too, I was looking at the calendar and season 4 is coming up soon. And we have a lot of really exciting people booked. I mean, both previous to this episode and ongoing from this episode. Very exciting stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. The Australian invasion is on its way.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Beatles, but
yeah, that's right.
with better hair and different accents. So I guess not really at all like the British invasion.
But yeah, we've got lots of fun guests to round out season 3, which we're really excited about.
We do indeed.
Today we are excited to be talking to Simone Kain, who's joining us from Australia. And I forgot to write down which state or province, so you can, or territory. I have provinces, you have states and territories. Anyway, you can tell us which one. And Simone, we always start our interviews with the exact same question. So this is a way to introduce yourself. So we always ask, what are you growing?
Yeah, that's a big question. Well, so I'm married to a farmer. We don't actually live on our farming property. It's a family farm, but it's about 15 minutes away from where we live in the township of Penola, South Australia, which is right down the bottom of Australia, basically, on the sort of border of Victoria and South Australia, not too far away from the coast. It's a really fertile, productive area, which basically anything that you can think of that grows down this way. So we have massive forestry, livestock, fishing, aquaculture, great wineries. Yeah, we've got it all down here. But our farm in particular, we are on about 5,000 acres. We mainly beef cattle trading, so we don't do any breeding. And we've got a few pesky sheep still running around, not as many lately. And we also grow quite a few potatoes on our property. So a lot of our land is used for growing potatoes. It's quite sandy soil, and it's been in the family for quite a few years. And my husband Justin runs the property with his brother Alan and their other brother, who sort of runs their books, but he's in Adelaide. He's an engineer, so he does that remotely, which is really nice to keep it all in the family. So Justin and I have 3 sons together, George, and then he's 14, and Frank and Louis, who are twins, and they're 11. And they're all a bit crazy, a bit farm mad, and any opportunity that they have to go out to the farm, they jump at it. They love riding their motorbikes out there and helping Justin on the farm, driving machinery and, building cubbies and bike jumps and all that sort of thing. And then me personally, I grew up on a farm as well, not too far away from here. My parents had a livestock transportation business that they operated for about 30 years from our home. So there was always sort of like a flurry of different people coming and going from our home base, from livestock agents to different farmers, shearers, truck drivers, obviously. And yeah, I didn't really ever think that I would get into the agricultural sector per se as a career, but that's where I've ended up in a roundabout way. My background is creative, so I am a graphic designer and website developer. I started my first creative agency when I was 18 years of age, and so that was sort of the inception of the internet somewhat. So a lot of businesses around this area didn't have an email address or a website back in those days. So that was about 1998. And so I ran that for about 10 years before I joined forces with another creative agency doing more branding and graphic design, website development and custom programming, custom content management systems before the invention of WordPress. And that sort of led me into what I'm doing now, which is called George the Farmer. So, George the Farmer educates children about where their food and fibre comes from and how important farmers are to our everyday lives. And I've stepped away from the creative agency. I separated from my business partner last year, and he's taken on the creative agency, and I'm the 100% owner now of George the Farmer and everything that we do. And as part of George the Farmer, the platform, we have picture storybooks. There's 13 in the series to date, and I write all of the books. We've got 5 baby board books. We have original farm music that you can stream on any platform, and it's fun. It's not like dodgy music that hurts your ears. We do paddock to plate videos that are available on the ABC in Australia and our YouTube channel. So we go out onto real farms and investigate how produce is grown with our big George the Farmer. And we do singing and dancing in that as well. And then we also have performances. So we tour around Australia performing, singing and dancing with our big George. And like we've performed Perth Royal Show, Sydney Royal Show, and then we do lots of sort of food farm events as well. And then we also have free curriculum aligned educators resources for teachers to use in the classroom. So we've got about 13 of those to date, and I'm about to release another 3. And they basically let teachers teach STEM subjects or STEAM subjects, and so science, technology, engineering, maths, arts. And through that, they're also teaching kids where the food and fibre comes from. So to date, with our resources, we've helped educate over 600,000 kids in Australia through those resources alone, not, taking into account any of our books or videos, the reach on those. And our resources have also just been converted over to the New Zealand curriculum as well, which is really exciting. And I hope that one day those resources will be converted over to other countries' curriculums as well. And we do all that for free as well. So teachers can download those resources for free. And we've been working with New Zealand and whoever else wants to work with us to convert those resources into their curriculum as well.
So, Simone, is someone who found you because I was ferociously searching YouTube for farm videos that were not blippy when my little boy was
what the key is to that, making annoying videos.
Making adults want to die, probably. I appreciate that your music is not nearly as horrific as his, because when your kids insist on singing it over and over and over, it was a real relief to get something with some content to it. And also, Blippy, God love him, no scientific accuracy whatsoever, which as a producer I find really frustrating that they're misleading / straight up lying to kids. The other thing I was really surprised by as a producer myself was how much I had no idea about how other things are grown. And I will admit, I'm a dumb American, like so many dumb Americans. I can admit it. I had no idea that there was more in. I mean, I'm sure if I'd thought about it, I would have realized this, that there's more than like outback beaches and like McLeod's daughters. Like, that's my experience of Australia, right? I had no idea how fertile your area of Australia is and just how there's not a lot of places in the US that we get that variety of production.
So a lot of our videos have been shot in the southeast and in South Australia, but we have actually travelled as well. So we do have some of the videos that are available on YouTube. We shot up in Darwin, so right at the top of Australia, where it's quite tropical. So we had shot mangoes, watermelons or melons and Asian greens up there. And then we've done eggs in Victoria. But yeah, we do have really fertile pockets right across Australia.
My first question, this was my biggest question. Knowing that your husband's a farmer, I'm assuming that it's not him. How did you sucker somebody into wearing that giant George costume? We'll have to put a picture up for our listeners, but it is like, that's a big costume. Like, that's not a...
It's definitely not my husband, but he does get asked all of the time. He's never been in it. It is a massive costume. George has got a very big head, big hat and big boots. Well, actually, funnily enough, to start off with, I was the first one that actually got in George. We were heading off to the biggest beef show in the Southern Hemisphere, which is in Rockhampton, Queensland, and it's called Beef Australia, and it's actually just been on again the last 3 weeks. 3 weeks ago, I just have been up there with George. But yeah, we were, when we first launched George, so the idea for George came about when my son George was 2.5 and I was pregnant with the twins. He was just obsessed with the farm. He'd sit up at the kitchen bench and look through farm machinery training books, pointing out combine harvesters and tractors and whatever. And I was looking desperately for something to try and keep him entertained when his brothers arrived, because I was just worried, as you are as a parent, when the second one comes along that they're going to get neglected. And obviously with 2 coming along, I thought, well, I'm really not going to have any time for him. And so I was trying to find apps or books around farming that could keep him entertained while I was busy. And the only books or apps that I could sort of come across were Old MacDonald Had a Farm sort of style books or apps. And they, he'd collect the eggs, he'd milk a cow by hand, he'd be wearing daggy old overalls. And it just made farming and the agricultural sector just look so old-fashioned. And there wasn't anyone telling sequential stories about what really happens in agriculture. So, not just from seeding or shearing, say if you've got sheep, but agriculture is so broad, like you were mentioning from the videos that we have as well. You've got horticulture and all of the different, vegetables that you can grow in hort. There's grains and there's seafood. And even within aquaculture, there's, so many different types of seafood and different ways of catching things, from oysters to prawns to, salmon and whatever else. And there's forestry and there's just so much as part of the agricultural sector, and there was no one telling those stories. And because I guess I have a creative background, it just popped into my head, and I thought there's this great opportunity here to create a character, a human character, because there isn't another human farming character globally that can help share these stories and inspire lots of little farm kids like my George, to have someone to look up to. And so we launched George the Farmer. We were trying to get into the app market at that stage. So that was sort of the inception of the app market. And we thought I went back and spoke to my business partner, Ben, about the idea, and he was keen on it. And so I decided to write this first story, and he was going to illustrate, and we decided to launch it as an interactive story app so that then we could showcase to prospective clients that we could also build apps. And we just sort of thought that George would tick away and sit in the back of the creative agency, and that was all that it was ever sort of going to do. And then it sort of took off after the launch, I guess, because it was, I guess, in some ways one of the first agricultural apps launched in Australia, even though it wasn't, actually doing, farm management or anything like that. It was focused on ag. And we were in the top 10 apps on the educational category for iTunes for quite a while. And we, just received quite a lot of attention around it. So it helped, I guess, make us discovered somewhat within Australia. And so it wasn't long after we launched the app that then we were asked to go up to Queensland and speak to the agricultural teachers up there about what we were doing in trying to help educate kids about farming. And I just got to say as well, so when I first came up with the idea, it was to inspire kids to, have someone for them, an inspirational character involved in farming that they could resonate with. But then not long into writing the first story, I came across the really staggering statistics that I had no idea about at the time about how much people don't know about farming and where their food comes from. And so there was a survey released in Australia not long before that 75% of Australian Year 6 children didn't identify everyday lunchbox items like a banana, a piece of cheese, or a piece of bread as coming from a farm. And there were other crazy statistics along with that. And I think there's a recent one out of the US, I think, that about 16 million adults think chocolate milk comes from brown cows. So that disconnect, is massive, and it's a global problem. Like these statistics come out of every country. And so I thought then, okay, so not only do we have to inspire kids to learn about agriculture, we really need to educate them as well to not only be able to make healthy food choices in their future, but also to be able to support the agricultural sector. Because if people don't understand where their food comes from, how can we expect consumers, like kids, who are our future consumers and our future decision makers, to be able to support the sector? So the educational piece came into that. So we were going to Queensland to talk to the teachers about what we were doing, and then they also asked us if we could entertain groups of school kids coming into the event each day. And we thought, how are we going to do that? We had to do it outside, and we only had the app, and it was going to be too bright for the app. And my business partner at the time could sing, and so we wrote a couple of songs together. We decided to get a big outfit made, and we picked up the outfit at the Melbourne airport on the way to Queensland. I hadn't tried it on or anything like that. I had a friend who used to work on a Disney cruise ship who choreographed a couple of dances for me. And we got up to Queensland, and I got into the big outfit and danced around in 30 plus degree Celsius Queensland heat. I'm not sure what that is Fahrenheit, but it's bloody hot and very hot and sweaty in one of those massive outfits. And really learned a new appreciation for people who dress up in those outfits. But George was a hit, and we were actually filmed on a national farming program that is watched by lots of people in metro areas as well. And then they came down and filmed us on the farm and in the office, working on George the Farmer stuff. And after that, it really took off, and people started asking us to their events all around Australia.
I think that speaks a lot too to the big frustrations that I had as a farm parent of a little kid who needed every tractor sales brochure that we came across, which in rural Iowa is a lot. There's stacks of them still around our house. What we see, especially for children, is either an old white dude on a narrow front tractor in overalls with one cow and probably one barn cat and a wife who bakes a lot of cookies. And that is the explanation of farming. Or it's a 3-minute long John Deere advertisement, which also is just long enough for your kid to get into it and then for it to be over and them to be yelling at you again. But I appreciate that George, too, is an adult and he's not stupid. I feel like so much children's media acts like children, and especially town children, if it's farm media, are dumb. And little kids are not stupid. They are not. And it's nice to see something that's not pandering to them, I guess.
Yeah, I think there has been that portrayal of just the sector being old-fashioned and dumb farmers. You're exactly right. And that's where, I guess, with George, and George is also backed up in all of our picture storybooks by his very talented wife, Dr. Ruby. She's a agronomist, and she often solves a lot of the problems in the stories. And that was really important for us to showcase the real a lot of people have come back they say to me, why is it a male that you've, made as the main character? Why haven't you done it as a female? And I'm like, because honestly, I did it for my son. That's where the idea came from. So that's why it was called George the Farmer. But I really wanted to make sure that I was showcasing women in ag as well, because I know that they make up about 50% of the ag workforce. And I've got lots of friends who are involved in ag, who work in ag. And so in some ways, let's say when people haven't read any of our stories and don't understand the background really of George, they don't understand that there is a really strong female lead in our stories. And so George somewhat is a bit of a champion of women in ag. He's a silent champion, like he's promoting through our books, the strong role that Ruby plays in agriculture. So Ruby's personality and traits were modelled off of a great friend of mine called Kath, and she did her PhD in agricultural as well, and so she's Dr. Kath, and she's actually married to a George, and George is an awesome farmer too, and his personality character traits are actually George the farmer's character traits. So he's a bit of an Aussie larrikin. He loves sport and he's everybody's mate. He's just a really supportive, fun person. So yeah, I think it's been really crucial to make sure we portray farmers, both men and women, as being innovative and professional and forward-thinking.
I have to say that I kind of like that Dr. Ruby has her own career and that she's not a farm wife, because I feel like we hear that from so many people where the women are active farmers, but there's such a perception of them just being the farmer's wife. Like, you have a career, whether it's staying home and raising kids or going out or farming or, it wouldn't run without you. So I like that Dr. Ruby's got her own thing going.
Yeah, she's an agronomist, but she does help out on the farm. And yeah. And then they're joined as well. George and Ruby are joined by their two children who are twins. And that's Jack and Lucy. So they also sort of tear around on the farm and help solve problems as well.
Have you or your son ever regretted using the name George?
Well, I do. Yeah, I think at the moment George is, he's 14 and he gets quite embarrassed by it. So, for instance, I had to go to his school a few weeks ago and do a book reading to the reception, like the little kids at school, and the teachers wanted to put it into the school newsletter and promote it for me, and I said, oh no, please don't do that, because George will get really embarrassed, and his mates call him George the farmer, which they all think it's fun and they're not worried about it, but George is a bit shy, and so he sort of goes into himself a little bit.
Yeah,
so
he's
we
gotten
don't
to that
promote
age where,
it as much.
yeah, where that association is.
So, but I think, down the track, when he gets a little bit older, I'm sure he'll be fine with it. And he's still, when he found out that I actually didn't realise that I hadn't told him that it was for him. I think he just thought that I worked for someone called George the Farmer. And when he found out, it was only about, I don't know, probably 4 years ago or something, that I made it for him, he was so shocked. He said, "Oh, wow, thanks, Mum." But yes, I'm sure he'll turn around again. But Frank and Louis, they're pretty keen not to have their names involved in anything.
Yeah, I think at 14, everything is humiliating. So I'm sure that, having your mom name a cartoon character after you is not any better. Well, that answers my question about whether your kids still thought George was cool or whether they still think you're cool.
Yeah. Oh God, I don't know about if they think I'm cool, but I think they're really proud. They're proud of everything that I produce. They love reading the new stories when they come out still, even though they're past the picture book age, they still like to read. They like to, as in, read and see how I've written something or what's happened in it. They love watching the videos still. And, like you were mentioning before, Katie, about, not understanding everything that's grown in Australia. You can grow up on a farm, but you don't necessarily know, you might grow up on a cattle farm, but you don't know how apples are grown or the seasonality of apples, or, you don't know how cotton's grown and where our clothes like, shirts and denim jeans come from. Just because you grow up on a farm doesn't mean you know everything about farming. So they find the videos just as fascinating as well. And yeah, they come along to some events, and not many, but just some local ones sometimes. And they get pretty blown away when they see little kids coming up to George and how fascinated they are with him. They are proud of it.
Our goal as podcasters is to create a program that makes you feel less alone as a farming, ranching, or homesteading parent, but we can't do it alone.
Supporting Barnyard Language on Patreon helps us cover production costs and ensures the future of the show, but you'll also gain access to exclusive perks and behind-the-scenes content.
Your support enables us to continue bringing you the thought-provoking conversations and inspiring stories week after week. So if you find value in what we're doing and want to be part of the Barnyard community, head over to patreon.com/barnyardlanguage and choose a tier that suits you. So you mentioned that they are maybe a little bit on the older side for some of the picture books. What are kind of your target audiences? I mean, I know that they can appeal to a wider range depending on kids' developmental ages, but in terms of both the school curriculum and your books, what are kind of your targets in terms of what you're aiming your material at?
Yeah, so the picture books are 2 to 10. So they're more for an advanced reader if they're reading by themselves. But as most kids, they love having picture storybooks read to them, and they're quite bright in appearance. So young kids really like looking at all of the colourful illustrations, and especially any farm mad kids that love animals or machinery. There's lots of that in all of the books. But I'm actually just now this year in the early stages of working on what's coming next for George. So I'm looking at bringing out, because in the picture storybooks, so each book sort of tackles a challenge, and whether that's on George and Ruby's farm or it's on one of their mates' farms. And the language is probably slightly complex, more so than, your really early picture storybooks that might be in rhyme or, like the Hungry Caterpillar style. They're a lot more advanced than that. So what I'm in the early stages of doing now is bringing out a junior picture book series, which will be in rhyme. And so that'll be a new series, and there'll be hardcover books. And then after that, not after that, but I plan on writing the first couple of those. And then the next series that's going to come out will be middle grade literature. So I'll do a short novel for kids as well. And I'm planning on writing that from Jack and Lucy, the kids' perspective, and the adventures that they have on the farm and seen through the kids' eyes.
I love that. Yeah, so you can get them from little kids and have it be something that can grow with them and develop along with the people, so that if they're still into farming, then they get to follow it along all the way through their life.
Yeah, and that's sort of come back as well from feedback from our customers. We just we run a survey every couple of years, and we try and sort of bring to fruition some of the things that are asked for out of those surveys. And the survey that we just put out a few weeks ago indicated that they were after middle grade literature. They wanted early learning readers as well. So we're looking at doing early, like school readers, a series of those, like 20 readers to come out to help learn how to read, and the early picture books as well. And we actually find that a lot of kids that struggle, and it's not just boys, it is girls as well, a lot of kids that are struggling with learning how to read and forming that love of learning, when they come across George the Farmer, they're fascinated with it, and it has helped them discover how to read and how to learn. And we did it as part of our survey, because we do have a lot of feedback that comes back in from teachers and parents across the country around that. Like, we had one little girl, or a teacher, tell us quite a few years ago now, but that this little girl, she had only written half a page of text for the whole year. She was really disengaged with learning. And when the teacher did our first couple of stories in the classroom, and then they did one of our curriculum aligned guides in there, and part of that was to write a story, and she was so fascinated by farming, and she was from a farming area as well, but she was so fascinated with learning through George the Farmer that she went and wrote 6 pages of text after this, and it was all on planting a wheat crop. So it really inspires kids to discover that love of learning, because kids are naturally inquisitive about food, animals, and a lot of the time machinery as well, for boys and girls. And so if you can sort of put those things in front of them and let them learn through those avenues, they can learn English and writing, they can do maths, they can do science, they can do so much through the broader lens of agriculture. And we had, as part of the survey, we put out the question, has George the Farmer help the children in your life discover a love of reading and learning? And 100% of respondents wrote yes, which was amazing. And then the other question that we put out was, has George the Farmer helped the children in your life increase their knowledge on food and fibre? And 98% said yes on that. So we're getting some really good results. We just and we've been around for a while, but we still are sort of relatively unknown. So we're still trying to push that out there and really get into metro areas as well, so we can help shorten that rural urban divide. And really, I think we can shorten the rural urban divide and connect metro people back to the country and back to the roots and back to where food is grown. It just helps create really healthy, sustainable communities, I think.
I think part of what I liked a lot about George in the videos is that he literally doesn't have a voice. He doesn't talk in any of the videos. But I think it makes him a lot less...
He yells at the sheep too much. He always loses his voice.
Well, it makes him a lot less intimidating, I think, because kids can come up with their own idea of what he would sound like or what he would say, or, whatever. And so to me, it makes it a much more interactive thing, because he's not just lecturing at you from the screen. It's two adult hosts, right, who are normally talking to farmers, and George is just kind of dancing around and looking excited.
Yeah, we do try and involve him by saying, "Isn't that right, George?" Or, and we sort of propose the question to him but answer for him as well at the same time, so that it sort of isn't as obvious. He's a bit of a mute, but he doesn't speak in our videos. It's a bit tricky for him to speak. Maybe if we get into an animated show one day, he'll find his voice.
So you don't have to reveal the identity of whoever's in that costume.
Oh, look, it changes all the time.
What's the job interview like for being George the Farmer? Like, is there a skill?
Well, there's a certain size that people have to be. They don't have to have any acting background or dancing background. They just have to be willing and able to, get into a costume and realise that it's going to get hot in there. And they might be in there for sort of 45 minutes at a time, and just not be afraid to give it a go. It's actually, generally a bit of an introvert most of my life. And so when I started getting into George when we first began, I would never have gotten up and danced on a stage as me, or, and I hated speaking in front of people up on a stage. But getting inside of the costume and sort of then getting up on stage and being able to hide behind the costume but still be in front of people really helped my confidence. And it's amazing to watch. Like, we've had a year 12 student, at the end of their schooling, a boy, he wanted to be an actor, and so he travelled with us all around Australia for 2 years. Not as in travelling all the time, but we'd have one gig that might have been for 4 or 5 days. He was allowed to have that off of school because they knew that he wanted to do acting as a career. And it was just so great for his confidence and for his acting skills as well. And last year we had a girl from here, and she's 23, I think, 21 maybe. Anyway, she's gorgeous. She could be a model, and but she's so shy. She's the biggest introvert. She used to babysit our kids, and I said to her, do you want to come and be George the Farmer? And she's like, what does that involve? So I told her about it and said, there's heaps of traveling. You'll get to go to all of these amazing places over Australia that you would probably never consider going to. You'll meet beautiful people, because anybody who invites us into their areas to perform at their events, they're, so passionate about what we do. And so they're always so friendly and lovely. And she was really shy, and I said, give it a go, and it will be really great for your confidence. And it was amazing. By, I don't know, 6 or 9 months after she started doing it for me, we had to go to Perth. We were at the Perth Royal Show last year, and she had to get up and do a rehearsal not in costume, and it was out on the stage, and it was in the public arena. People were walking, back and forth, and I didn't even click, that she might have been a little bit shy about it. And I stood back and I was watching her up on the stage, and I thought, oh my goodness, like, look at you go. You would never have done this, 9 months ago. And I said to her after, I said, can you believe you just did that? And she said, yeah, I can't believe it. Anyway, and then not long after that, she got offered a full-time job working in a winery to become a winemaker. So, and being a winemaker, you have to get out there and talk to lots of people and present and things like that. So they're going to be fantastic skills for her to take forward as well in her career. So, yeah, look, it doesn't matter if you're an introvert to get in George, because you can hide behind George, but it definitely helps with your confidence.
So I think I have one more George-specific question. Is his hat attached on the costume? It's got to be, right?
It clips on.
Okay. I just picture trying to keep this big old hat attached up there.
Yeah, no, it clips on. You can remove it, but it clips on, yeah. Yeah, the costume was made in Australia.
Cool. The other thing I really appreciated was that there are so few stuffed toys for little boys, and especially doll sort of toys. There's, a lot of doll lines have one boy doll who's usually really ugly and has weird hair. And being able to get my kid...
And only one outfit.
Yeah. Being able to...
Well, George has only got one outfit.
But so do a lot of farmers.
That's his style.
I mean, it's also literally attached to his body. So, but I mean, being able to get my little boy a doll who looks like him. He actually dressed up as George the Farmer for Halloween one year, which isn't much of a costume around here because it's just what everybody wears all the time. We did have to buy him a new hat, but, to get him a doll of a character he really liked that wasn't a dinosaur or otherwise, out to kill and eat people, and wasn't a really ugly version of a girl doll, was really appreciated to get, something.
Yeah, we have actually a lot of schools use our dolls as well. So we've got a George the Farmer cuddle doll and a Ruby Farmer cuddle doll. And a lot of schools use them as teaching aids as well. So they can use our free resources in the classroom without our books, but they can use them with our books as well. And the kids have a journal and they get to take home George or Ruby, and they have to take them to the supermarket or take them, to the farm or take them to the home or wherever they are, and record and take photos of what they're getting up to and what they're learning about with regards to food and fibre in their environments. So yeah, they're loved by lots of little kids from schools, but also definitely in many homes around Australia and obviously internationally as well. It was so nice to see that picture pop up the other day of George.
Yeah, I was. That's actually how we connected with you. Was I was doing a little surgery on our George and had posted it. He's had a little run in with our Australian Shepherd.
That seems fitting, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, took a little taste of him, and I don't know where George's hat is either. My kid keeps asking about it. I'm like, buddy, it's not my toy. I don't know.
Might need to order a replacement.
Maybe we should clip his hat on.
I was just going to say, you've mentioned a couple times about the free curriculum for teachers, but I'm sure that developing curriculum is a really time intensive and labor intensive process. I was just wondering how you were able to do all that work and then provide it to teachers for free. Do you have outside funding, or is this just a passion project that you really feel strongly about? How does that work out?
So we're a for-profit company, but we do run on sort of social values where I think it's so important that kids know where their food and fibre comes from. Having said that, we are supported to produce the curriculum aligned resources. So we have done some off of our own back that are out there available for free. But we do generally get grants, or we work with different rural development corporations like, say, Cotton Australia or, like the apple industry to produce these resources. And we work with educational consultants to have them developed. So I don't actually write them. They're all written by qualified academics. And I could put them behind a paywall and try and get schools to pay a monthly or yearly subscription fee, but I don't think that's the right thing to do because I think we want as many kids to know where food and fibre comes from. And so, I'm happy to make them easily accessible for teachers, and especially time poor teachers that don't have the ability to create these resources. You can't expect teachers to go out and try and teach about food and fibre if they have no idea about anything. So we need to be able to give these resources, and especially if they're fun. Like, there are lots and lots and lots of food and fibre resources available internationally for kids or for teachers to use in the classroom, but there's a difference between making them really creative and fun and having characters that can help engage the kids in their learning than just sort of saying, like wool comes from sheep. There's a bit of a knack to how you make them really creative so that the kids want to learn about them. And then that helps the teachers in the end anyway. So all of our, and even with our videos as well. So we have, like, those videos have been acquired by the ABC, but in Australia, but the acquisition rate isn't much more than, a pair of sort of, good farm boots for a 5-year licensing agreement. So we do have to get sponsorship to help produce those as well. There's not really any ongoing revenue for any of that content, but they're awesome. They're so much fun to make. And we, like you're saying, they show the diversity of the ag sector, but even if you're involved in farming or you're an adult, we get lots of uni students as well tell us as well that they learn from that content. So I think, we could hide behind a paywall, but we won't be doing that because it's more important for the sector to sort of connect people back to where their food and fibre comes from.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you're doing incredible and really important work. I just it it creates more work for you, right? To develop the material and then also find creative strategies to pay for it, to make sure that it gets into the hands of the right people. It's then more on you in terms of the creativity that it requires, both to produce content and to figure out how to get it all funded.
Yeah, and even though it's a reasonably small business. Like, I'm the only full-time employee in the business, but I do work with the same subcontractors every time, say, we do a video, or and I've got a part-time employee who works in. We've got a concept store now that we just opened in August last year, so our very first retail shop. But yeah, so I do, and obviously my musician who sings in our videos, and the person who's George. So there are regulars generally, but I am the only full-time employee. But I think that's the next sort of iteration, I guess, of George now is probably working with more content creators to help, create more of this sort of stuff that kids want to see, teachers want to see, parents want to see, so that I can work probably more so in the business and getting those partnerships off the ground. And we've got a partnership with Rabobank as well, which is an international bank, and they have been supporting book packs into schools. So we run a competition every year in Australia, and this is in New Zealand as well. And schools can enter for the opportunity to win a book pack into their classroom, and that competition has been pretty much doubling in size with the amount of entries and book packs that are being sent out to schools as well every year. So those types of partnerships are really important to what we're doing. But to sort of acquire those partnerships, they can take 3 or 4 years to get off the ground. So there's a lot of behind the scenes work to make things happen within the business.
I love the idea too of George maybe branching out, because George and Lucy are adults, um, addressing things like farm transition or farm finances or rural mental health or all those things in that material for slightly older kids, and certainly not in like and this is why you have to go to a lawyer kind of way, but just to sort of normalize these things that we don't talk about that are such a part of farming. um,
Yeah, we just had another partnership as well last year or the year before with Farm Safe Australia. So we developed an animated music clip video around being safe on the farm, and then some free teaching resources as well. Yeah, basically for parents and teachers to use to try and help keep friends that might come over to the farm as well as their own kids safe. But there's definitely the opportunity to be able to have lots of fulfilling partnerships on the ground, from supermarkets to like even to McDonald's, that promote that they work with Australian beef, and farmers to whatever produce that goes into their foods. There's a lot of opportunity to use George and Ruby to promote different things.
so I realized too, and obviously I could have Googled this at any point in the last several years that I've been aware of Georgia Farmer, but I can get it straight from the horse's mouth, as it were. What in the name of hell is a googly egg?
A googie egg?
Googly?
Googie.
What is it?
Well, it's just what we call eggs, I guess. I mean, not everybody calls them googie eggs, but as a kid, I don't know. I think, always grown up going, oh, would you like a little googie egg?
I actually did my study abroad in New Zealand for animal science and had a Scottish professor who had lived in New Zealand for 20 years, and I had to ask him what a chook was in my first day of an upper level ANSI class, and it was horrifying to see the look on my.
We do have a lot of different terminology in Australia, and so that's another thing that I'm looking for. I mean, all of our products are available to buy through our website, georgethefarmer.com.au, but and we ship internationally. We do have a couple of stockers in the US that you can find on our website, but I'm looking at how I can distribute and get our content easier over into other countries like in the US. And if I am going to, I mean, they're all fine as they are, the books, and we do have some terminology references in the back of some of the books as well. But whether or not if we do bring out, a certain range just that goes, more suited just for the US, whether I put a few more little terminology bits in the back for the Australian lingo.
I mean, everybody loves Bluey, so I think that the Australian invasion is already happening in the kids' world. So they've already got all the terminology figured out. Maybe not the ag specific ones.
Bluey's fantastic, and I think what Bluey has done for Australia is amazing, because we were actually looking at developing an animated television series probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and we were working with a production house out of Sydney for that. And back then, this is before Bluey had come out, and we were told that, you know, Australia is too foreign for international audiences, that we'd have to have a not an Australian accent. We wouldn't, like, we basically had to make the world that George and Ruby lived in more universal. And so we had this sizzle reel developed by the production house, and it sort of was like a cross between, the landscape looked like sort of India, South Africa, Australia, and like the animals looked all really weird. And anyway,
so it looks like nowhere.
Oh God, it was awful. And they took it over to, I signed a really bad deal. They had 1% creative control over everything. Anyway, that was a learning curve. And they took it over to France, to MIPCOM, which is the biggest and the main sort of kids television pitching conference. And they got lots of feedback from it. Nothing got picked up, thank goodness. And they came back and, you know, they were like, so, you know, we've got to go into these reiterations, da-da-da. And I said, oh my God, I can't do it. Like, we have to pull that now, because if that gets off the ground, I will never forgive myself for what I've done to the ag sector with that going out. So, yeah, it took a little bit to get out of that contract. But I'm sort of now, you know, that's probably 5 years ago, and I'm ready to now start reinvestigating that. And the fact that, you know, Bluey's come out and it's been so successful as an Australian, you know, IP in its own right, it's, yeah, really exciting, I think, for other Australian brands.
I think that's one of the things I love about kids shows is you can, you know, I can watch Peppa Pig and, you know, like when your kids start to pick up the little English accents, even though they've never been to England, or you know, start to take on some Australian words from watching Bluey, you know, kids programming can be universal. There's so much of it, and in Canada we get a lot of French programming. So some of that is Quebecois, and some of that comes from France. But it all translates, right? You know, it's for kids, and it's fun, and it's lighthearted, and you can figure it out. You know, it's not that cultural that you can't you know, understand that it works for kids in lots of different places.
Yeah, I think it's more of like an adults sort of thing, where they think there's this prescriptive way that everything has to be, you know, like a television show has to be this way, and a picture storybook has to be this way, and a novel has to be this way, and publishing has to happen this way. But I think as sort of media has grown over the last, you know, especially 5-10 years, and the advent of, you know, lots of self-publishing and YouTube, where people are their own creators, it's really shown that you can actually do things a lot of different ways and still be successful and find followers. Yeah, which is really exciting.
Yes, just based on the types of YouTube channels that my kids watch, I would say that that is definitely accurate, because no adult would choose to watch some of those things, and yet the kids love them, right?
I mean, we've been doing this for 3 seasons, so obviously there's an audience for pretty much anything.
Yeah, there you go.
So, Simone, one of my favorite parts about George is that he not only goes to farms, but that they cook the things that he sees there. Um, how does that? And it, I know the thing I had mentioned to Arlene first is that, like in the chicken episode, he comes back and they make chicken strips, chicken nuggets.
Oh, in the chicken, yeah, we did chicken, yeah, chicken nuggets, I think, yeah.
That he actually cooks meat, because as a meat producer there's such a disconnect. Like, it's okay to talk about farming, but not that we eat meat. And if you don't eat meat, like, that's totally fine, but why would we teach kids that we raise chickens and then not tell them what we do with them?
Exactly. It's a tricky one, but I think it's more, again, it's a tricky one for adults. Like, kids don't really actually think about it or care that much about it. Not so much all kids, but generally they sort of know, but they don't understand death. I think that's what it is, really. So yeah, it's more of adults, I think, that have that problem with it. But funnily enough, with that video, the ABC wouldn't acquire that, because they thought they'd get too many comments and ring-ins from vegans and vegetarians. So yeah, you can only watch that one on our YouTube channel. But we do like to go into the kitchen and then show kids the food that they can make with whatever we've learned about from the paddock, and do that whole connection from the paddock to the plate. And yeah, we have lots of comments about, kids loving whatever recipe it is that we've developed, and that they can cook it themselves in the kitchen. And yeah, it inspires them to be creative in the kitchen. And I love cooking, so that's like, I think if I wasn't a graphic designer, website developer, back in the day, I would have tried to be a chef. So yeah, it's nice to be able to bring in that sort of love of cooking into the videos as well. And we do have a couple of fibre videos though. We've got a wool video, a forestry video. So obviously we don't do any cooking with those. And we've just about a month ago, we went to New South Wales and filmed a cotton video. So we're learning how the cotton plant grows, because a lot of kids don't associate with cotton as coming from a plant. And so we shot that in partnership with Cotton Australia, and that's just due to be released any day now, which is going to be really exciting. So we've got a new cotton song, which is really catchy. It's a really good earworm, and we'll have a new music video that'll come out around that as well. And so obviously we don't go into the kitchen and cook anything with that, although we could have, because there is cottonseed oil. But we, sort of just educate about all the products that come from cotton through that video.
So, without knowing what the legalization of marijuana is like in Australia, are we going to see a George the Farmer goes to a pot farm situation?
Well, medicinal cannabis, or
Yeah, has I mean, it's largely recreational here, but not in Iowa.
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't do a recreational drug or alcohol one. Like, I probably wouldn't go. We have been asked to do, because especially we're from a wine area here, to do something with the wineries. But I mean, it's just a bit tricky, I think, that balance between showing about alcohol and drugs. I probably wouldn't go into it, but there's lots of different aspects probably of viticulture that you could concentrate on in some respects, like just the science behind vine growing or something like that you could look at instead.
I suppose you could always do hemp production otherwise, sort of thing.
Yeah, and we've got hemp growers near here as well, and they produce like products for animals and for humans as well. So that could be quite interesting. Their packaging looks really amazing too. So yeah, that would look really nice.
We often ask too about whether it was harder to go from 0 kids to 1 kid or 1 kid to 2 kids, but I guess you went from 1 to 3. So what's your hot take on having kids? Just boil the whole experience down for us to everything you know about kids.
My take's different to my husband's take. He thinks I can't remember anything with the twins, but I say that the first was the hardest, because I think, you lose your identity a bit and you lose your freedom through this little person all of a sudden. I don't think I knew what had hit me. So I definitely struggled more, I feel, with the first. Even though there were two, I knew sort of, what I was going to be in for, besides the really ultra sore boobs and being stuck to a breast pump for a lot of the time. But yeah, I think the first was harder. But yeah, my husband Justin thinks I'm crazy and thinks that, no, I definitely found the twins harder. But no, I think it was the first.
You mentioned early on about not physically living at the farm, which I think for some people would seem like a strange choice. There seems to be this cultural expectation that if you're from a farm, you're living there. But that living and working in the same place, I know for my husband and maybe for lots of farmers, that is a challenge, right? To look outside and always see your workplace right outside your door. What went into the decision for your family to not live on the farm?
Well, at the time, so Justin's one of four brothers, and they, were all married at the time, and also his mum was part of the farm, and his older brother he lives on the farm. He was living out there in the main homestead. We were living in a little cottage out there, and so we sort of had to decide whether or not we were going to build out there a new family home, which would then be part of the farm, the whole family farm, or if we wanted to do our own thing. And we just sort of thought to have that independence from the whole family, that we would instead decide to come into town. We bought our own block of land and we built our own house in here. It's only 15 minutes away from the farm. It's been great with the kids. The kids, walk themselves to school. They're only just up the road. I'm close to the post office. So when I first started out with George and, I was doing all the packing myself, I was able to, do a trip every day to the post office instead of driving in and out with the kids every day, and plus doing post office runs and things like that. There's definitely cons. The kids complain all the time that we didn't have a house out on the farm that they could have grown up in. But we take them out there pretty much all of the time, so they don't really miss out. And I think if they were out on the farm, they'd probably complain that they, couldn't come into town to hang out with their mates. So, and like you said as well, for Justin to be able to turn off at night time and, not look outside and see all the things that still need to be done, I think that works well. Yeah, definitely pros and cons. And Justin grew up on a farm. Obviously, I grew up on a farm, so we actually had both always lived out of town. It has been a bit challenging, but when the block of land that we built on looks out to a rural setting, so like I'm looking out to gum trees, there's always kangaroos across the road that I'm looking at. There's no houses. I can't see any houses across the road, so we do sort of feel semi-rural anyway. And yeah, it is nice to sort of have our own independence. I think that's the main thing, really, just being part of a bigger farming family.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, I grew up on a farm where my dad and his brothers farmed together, and I know this is probably projecting far into the future because you only have teenagers at this moment, but what do you see as, transition when it's siblings is one thing, but when it starts to go down to cousins, then that gets more complicated. Are those discussions that your extended family are already having?
So I think they're sort of kicking off on tomorrow, actually. So my brother-in-law who lives on the farm has 3 children, and they're all like, I'd say one is a female, Ella. She lives in Adelaide, and she actually does all the George the Farmer social media work for me. And she studied commerce, but she's really keen to sort of stay in the ag sector, and that's why she loves, doing all the George the Farmer social media stuff, because she's so passionate about ag. So that, Alan has 3 kids that are keen probably to be back on the farm. We've got 3 kids that at this stage are sort of half saying that they want to be on the farm. They bought their eldest brother out of the farm quite a few years ago. So there's 3 of them now. And the other brother who lives in Adelaide, who does the books, his kids aren't as keen. They're quite city-based kids, so they're not as keen to come back on the farm. But yeah, the farm's definitely not big enough for 6 kids or 6 other families. So there is a lot of discussion that has to sort of start happening around what the future looks like. And yeah, I've got no idea how it's going to go down.
That's okay. That's the honest truth, right? Sometimes we think that the worst problem would be that no one wants the family farm, but a similarly difficult problem can be that everybody wants the family farm, and there just isn't enough to support. Like you said, it's not just not people alone, it's those families that eventually come grow over time, and whether one farm can support all of those households, because they're not all going to live in the farmstead together. I was listening to you on a few podcasts this past week to prepare for today, and there was one from a couple of years ago now where you were talking about pre-pandemic. It sounds like you're back to doing a lot of travel again now, but you had at that time been doing a lot of travel, and and started to get to a point where you were burnt out and struggling with anxiety. And I was wondering if that shift during the pandemic of not being able to travel or doing those extra things helped you reevaluate, or brought you back into a place where you could kind of reprioritize, or how has that looked over the last couple of years?
I think, yeah, there's. I think leading up to just before the pandemic, I think, and that, when I was mentioning about getting burnt out a bit, I think I'd sort of I was at a point in my life where I really sort of felt like um, I hadn't really experienced anything bad happen to me, or, I hadn't had any trauma really or anything like that. And I remember thinking, wow, everything just keeps going really well. And then, as happens to all of us at some stage in our life, things happen. And so, yeah, sort of not long before the pandemic, I had, quite a few challenges. And then, with the pandemic, it was just a great time to reset. And I think that not traveling really helped to sort of slow down the pace of life. And for me to start, I guess, focusing on growing personally. And so I read a lot of, or listen to a lot of audiobooks about self-development and business as well. I find all of that really fascinating and interesting. And yeah, definitely stopping travel, I think, helped to reprioritize what we were doing, to concentrate more on probably making more content while we couldn't travel. But I think it's just a journey, isn't it? Life, like, you're always thrown different curveballs. Like, I was sort of thinking that was at that time, that was probably the biggest curveball that I'd probably have in my life. And then last year ended up being crazy. I had like Louis, one of our twins, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the start of the year. So, we had air ambulance trips to the capital city to stabilize him, and that was, and sort of coming to terms with a new way of life for him and for all of us. And at that time as well, I was going through business separation with my business partner. So I'd been in business with him for about 14 years, and he's gone into politics now. And so he bought me out of the creative agency, and I bought him out of George the Farmer. And so that was probably, I don't know, like 9 months of negotiation to try and get to a point where we could separate there. So that was challenging. And then I had another curveball at the end of the year, and I just thought, wow, holy shit. Like, okay, they do keep coming in life, but I don't know what's happened. All of a sudden, I don't know if it's just, self-development over the years and then the big bangers last year. But I have just reached this point now where I feel so resilient, and I don't know, I just feel really calm. And when anything happens, I'm just like, okay, oh, well, it is what it is. Yeah, I just feel really at peace with everything at the moment. So, touch wood. But yeah, just I don't know. I feel, yeah, just at peace, like really happy with where everything's going, and prioritizing my health, and, going for walks every day, going to the gym, eating well, reading a lot, just looking after myself.
Yeah, and that's no small thing, right? We talk about self-care all the time, but actually doing it and fitting it into a busy life is a different thing. So the fact that you're in that place is not an accident. You're obviously putting in a lot of work to be in that place too.
Yeah, I think, and life just keeps getting busier, especially, as your kids grow up. You think that it's busy when they're little, but as they get older, it just seems to be busier and busier. And I think it's important that we, especially as, mothers as well, we sort of do get all of these admin jobs that take up a lot of space in your head, as well as trying to, run our own businesses, or, and help on the farm and whatever else we're doing. And it's really important that we set time aside for ourselves to be, who we want to be, and be healthy and the best people that we can be, so that we don't end up falling in a hole.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think even if your kids don't think you or George the Farmer is particularly cool right now, it is so, so important for them to see us. And I do think, especially mothers, doing the thing, doing the thing that brings that joy to our lives, and having an idea and making it happen and seeing it through, and, really pursuing a goal and all of that. Because I think we're so pushed towards, I will sacrifice everything for my family. And also, I can't do self care. I am simply too busy. And, just saying, no, that's not gonna, we're not doing that. And I think, especially the patriarchy, but, raising men, that we're raising men to not expect that from their partners either, and that we're raising daughters to expect not to be treated like that. So,
That's it. I think so. And yeah, I think the boys, they're still in bed, and I go to the gym at 5:30 in the morning, and they're actually still in bed when I get home, and um, they know I walk every day as well, and they see me, and they hear what I'm up to during the day. They'll ask me when they come home from school, oh, what have you done today, Mum? And they'll see me in front of my computer, and I'll tell them what I've been doing or show them what I've been doing. And yeah, I think the being an entrepreneur, they've taken that on board as well. So not only do they see it as a female being in business, but I think those entrepreneurial traits are sort of handed down to them as well. But I've also been doing a lot of reading on boys to men. So, trying to, because it's so tricky navigating that whole teenage sphere with the kids. And also, actually, something that I just realized a couple of weeks ago was that I had been struggling with, that I didn't really click with, was, going from that stage where as little boys, they just want to spend time with mum and they tell mum everything and, want to hang out with mum, to all of a sudden, I'm not number one. They've really gravitated towards Justin and they want to spend time with him out on the farm, and, they talk to him about their problems.
that will never happen with my precious angel baby.
Good luck to you, Katie. I'm gonna guess it will.
Because we're very hard in that phase. I love it so much. I feel a little bad for my husband.
But yeah, it just dawned on me, and I was like,
no, I'm sure it will. Don't ruin it for me.
I've got one that still, likes to get into bed and have a cuddle with me and always gives me a hug all the time, and he'll talk to me, but more so than Justin. But yeah, just all of a sudden realizing that I'm the second fiddle now, I'm not the first fiddle. And I guess sort of embracing that. And I'm watching Justin now step up to that role of being sort of the number one support person to them. And that's been really nice because he's a really good dad. He's great at talking to them and spending lots of time with them. But this book, her name's Maggie Dent, and she's an Australian author and sort of specialist, especially in boys, so young boys up to sort of, men. And she's released quite a few books over the years. And I'm listening to this one at the moment called Boys to Men. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. But yeah, that's got some really awesome nuggets in there that I'm finding interesting, especially around sort of, trying to gather mentors for your teenage boys in the community, like that. She calls them lighthouses. So, I'm thinking, okay, so for George, I might try and get him. There's a guy in town who works at the footy club, and he plays at the footy club that he plays at, but he also does personal training. And so, thought maybe I'll get a session with him for George once every 2 weeks, so that he forms this relationship with him, and he's got someone else that he can talk with if he needs another support person. And we've got one of our best friends is also a neighbour, and he sort of does on-off work, and George is very keen. He's a teenager and just wants to earn $1 million, and he wants to do fly-in, fly-out work when he leaves school at some stage. And our neighbour does a bit of that, and he's a great friend as well. And I thought, trying to connect those two together a bit more, and that could be another lighthouse for him, besides Justin. And just, because especially suicide's so high amongst teenagers and men, as in boys, to try and have those connections in place for them, so that those things, can try and stop those things from happening.
Those all sound like some really amazing things, and to not put. I'm going to use my own example. My husband is a fantastic dad, and he's a farmer. But I also see that there are qualities in some of my boys, that farming is probably not going to be their career. So to not pigeonhole them, or assume that this is the only male role model they need in their lives, but to seek out the people who have qualities or attributes that you would want them to learn from. That's a really, really important point that I'm going to give some thought to. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, there's lots of really good nuggets in there.
So Simone, one of the things we ask most of our guests is what your favorite thing is about raising kids in agriculture is.
Oh, I think, I mean, like I said, they don't live on the farm, but it's still that freedom, I think, for them. So when they're out on the farm, just to be able to have the responsibility and freedom that goes with being able to help drive machinery or learn how to drive machinery from an early age, to work with livestock, to just have the freedom to go and build things. Like, even though we do live in town, as I said before, we've got this reserve land out opposite the house that's quite massive. I can't see past all the trees and everything, and the kangaroos are out there, and the kids go out there every night after school, and they've been, the last 2 weeks they've been building a tree house out there, and they've also done a bit of a pump track further, and they do have a motorbike in the shed here at the moment that's just been fixed, and they're not allowed to, but they sneak it across the road and they ride that on this new push bike pump track that they've made. I think it's the freedom and probably that ability to be a bit cheeky. Like, it helps them be cheeky because they know they've sort of got that freedom, they can get away with a little bit. But I think that's important too, because it's where you sort of learn from your mistakes. You do, that freedom lets them make mistakes, and then they learn from that.
Mm-hmm. What is your biggest parenting struggle these days, other than not being number one anymore?
Yeah, well, just probably dealing with teenagers, I think. The moodiness and stuff like that, I think, is a bit hard to deal with. But I do remember what I was like as a teenager, and I was probably a bit of a bitch. So it's probably a bit of karma there. But yeah, that's why I've been listening to these books, trying to work out different strategies to deal with kids. Like, one thing that Maggie had written in her book was, I don't know if it was Maggie. I think it was something else. It must have been someone else I follow on Instagram. But they said, when your teenager comes out and says something or answers you and it's like just rude, instead of having a go at them for saying it, you just say, how about you start that again? Which I thought was really good, because it's not, having a go at them so much. It's politely making them realise that they've perhaps been rude to you. So yeah, I think it's probably the teenagers sort of dealing with and helping, trying to navigate them to make the right decisions and understand their actions, and when they really don't have a brain. I think you have to keep that in mind, that they're just not. And especially like our 14-year-old George, he's taller than Justin. He's massive. And yet he's only just turned 14. So he's just this like little baby in this sort of adult's body. And you sort of feel like and think like they should know more than what they do, but they don't, because they're just little kids still. So yeah, trying to navigate that and be patient.
Yes, it's a real mind bender, that one of looking up at your child and being like, "Do you not realize the consequences of your actions?" And then realizing, no, they really don't, because they're teenagers and they have teenage brains. They're still learning it all. Yeah.
I was thinking last night actually about how, as someone with only little kids, teenagers seem a lot like, sort of 4 and 5-year-olds, where their level of confidence in their abilities is frequently not matched by their actual abilities, except we're talking about, you know, drinking and pregnancy and car accidents and God knows what else, instead of, falling out of a treehouse, which, you know, ugh.
Well, I think they say there's I don't know how they work this out, but apparently, yeah, with boys, they don't have the capacity to understand risk taking properly until they're at least 28 years of age, which is pretty scary. But it sort of makes sense at the same time when you think about it.
But it seems like another reason to have more adults around who can kind of let them fail at less catastrophic things, because it's good for them to to screw up, but it's good if it's not a permanent sort of a consequence, I think. All right, so we ask all of our guests, if you were going to dominate a category at a county fair, what would it be? And categories can be real or made up to ensure that you win.
Well, like I said before, I do like cooking, so I think it probably would be a real category, and it would be like, I don't know, I'm not much of a baker, to be honest, but I do like entering cooking competitions. I have won a few down here, dessert competitions for wineries. But yeah, I think I would enter a cooking competition. But we've got quite a good little. It's not a county fair. We call them like country shows here, but they've got a category for the biggest weed, and my kids like entering that. So they scout around for the biggest weed that they can find. But they're often like about, I don't know, 3 meters sort of high. The weeds that usually win at the shows, so pretty impressive.
That is impressive. You almost have to avoid spraying a corner of the farm just to make sure that you get some good ones.
I like the idea that instead of like, feeding a pumpkin milk or whatever to grow it, you would have like one button weed that you're feeding, I don't know, smaller weeds to. I don't know what you would feed a weed to make it bigger, but
Yeah, there must be a strategy. Yeah.
you have to fence it off so nobody pulls it.
Yeah, that's right. No pesticide, but all the fertilizer in that section. So we'll go ahead and move into our cussing and discussing segment. Listeners, you know that you can send us your cussing and discussing either through our speak pipe or by email if you want us to read it out or if you want to hear it in your own voice. Katie, what are you cussing and or discussing this week?
So it feels real in my day, but appliances, for fuck's sake. The washing it's been a long week. The washing machines when we were kids, we're all three of us are about the same age, I'm going to assume. We all had that top loader that had like two settings and a dryer that maybe had two settings. And I guess the dryer always had a filter, but our washing machine didn't. And you could have put anything in that washer. And a fridge had maybe a freezer door and a fridge door. And if you were real fancy, it made ice somewhere. But now, like, your fridge connects to Wi-Fi and your washing machine connects to Wi-Fi. And I very stupidly, again, plugged the filter on our washer and remembered again that because I had no idea this was a thing I needed to concern myself with when I bought our washer, bought one that to access the filter, you have to literally take the back and both sides off the washing machine, which is bad enough, but our set is stacked. And so it is not possible.
That seems like a really bad design choice. That's not on you.
Yeah. So once again, I am waiting for the kindly appliance repair people to come out. And it just makes me so angry. And it's just so like, who did this? Who only does such clean laundry that they apparently never need to clean out the filter? Or is this like big filter is like making extra money this way? I don't get it. And why does my fridge need Wi-Fi? I just need it to keep shit cold. Like, I don't need it to do all these extra things.
And then when those extra things stop working, the whole thing is like, I cannot function. You can't ask me to do anything like keep things cold. I need to shut down.
We've been in our house for 14 years, and we're at the stage now where we're about to move into that because all of our, well, not all of them, but a lot of our appliances and things that are working in the house are sort of getting to the end of their shelf life, so to speak. So like our heat pump and air conditioning unit and things like that, parts in them are starting to pack up. Our fridge is actually about 24 years old, so we did not have anything talking to the internet there. And it's like part of the door's held together by really strong like gaffer tape. So we're about to go through where,
but you don't want to get rid of it because it still works.
I know it still works, but yeah, we're going to have to change over, and I'm going to have all those problems coming up, I think.
All right, so Simone, what do you have to cuss and discuss? Hoping that wasn't it because my kid was in here. Sorry.
No, that's all right. I knew that. Yeah, this came up, and I was trying to think of something that's annoying me lately. But I do try and stick to a bit of a positive attitude as much as I can. But probably the biggest thing at the moment is we need heaps of rain. Like, we're so dry here at the moment, and this area is not known for being dry, so it is a bit of a shock to the community at the moment. So, well, a lot of South Australia is really dry, and going into Western Victoria. So we've got lots of farmers, trying to feed out hay and grain, and then also just not having access to hay and grain at the moment. So I think, yeah, for our community here, but also wider spread, we're going to be going into some pretty tough times going forward. Like, we're just going into winter now. We've missed growing grass for the winter time. And so, who knows how long. I think we've been looking back at some statistics as to the last time that it was this dry, and it's sort of looking back into sort of 1926. It's not looking good. So, a bit of rain would be nice. But although, having said that, like I just said then, it's sort of even too late for rain now because we're going into shorter days, nearly the shortest day of the year here in Australia. So, yeah, just a bit of love for the community would be nice.
It's really scary to see those trends too, where you're looking back decades to compare, right? Not just the seasonality where it happens now and then, but that is a scary time, especially for farmers, right? Because we know how much the weather impacts everybody.
And it's not, not just the farmers, the flow-on effect to the rest of the community, the sporting groups that need support from, all the farming families, the schools, everybody is affected by it, all the retail shops. And then, of course, the local economy as well, combined with that, because there has been a downturn in Australia lately, like with many areas across the world. But, yeah, so it's not looking overly positive at the moment, but, yeah, we'll keep trying to hang in there.
Arlene, what do you have to cuss and discuss?
So compared to drought, mine seems really insignificant, but I am going to complain about bad kids' books because there are so many good ones out there. Then it just makes the bad ones that much more infuriating. And I'm going to call out the Disney books. Those Disney books where you're just reading the entire storyline of their movie, those ones make me want to set them on fire. They're so obnoxious. And at least within your own home, you can kind of purge the bad ones, get them out, set them on fire, whatever, donate them to somewhere where someone doesn't mind reading bad books. But it's when the kids go to the library and then they pick out a book just based on the cover or how bright it is. And then you realize that you're going to have to read this terrible book for the next couple of weeks.
And hope that it's not a favorite.
Yes, that's right. Let's renew that one. Oh no, someone else put a hold on it. We will have to bring it back. It can't stay in our home.
We do get a lot of comments in when we release a new book that parents are saying, "Oh my goodness, thank God you've got a new book," because we're so sick of reading those other books over and over again.
Yeah, the ones that become the favorite and you can memorize it, right?
I've actually asked our local librarian more than once if I could make a donation in lieu of ever seeing a particular book again. How about if I give you $20 and this one mysteriously disappears? My daughter has a real love for the My Little Pony books that are based on movies, where it appears that they just take one line out of every 3 pages of the movie and then make that a book, and it just anyway.
Yeah, it's like they were AI books before there was AI.
Yeah.
So we want to thank you so much, Simone, for joining us today. So if people want to watch George, order books, learn more about him, where should they go?
Yeah, so our website address is georgethefarmer.com.au, and you can find every sort of all of our social channels there, or just Google us on YouTube. You'll be able to find us there. We'd love as many people as we can to watch George the Farmer's adventures on YouTube, and And if anybody has any suggestions for stockists in the US or anywhere else where people may be tuning in from, please reach out to us or ask them to reach out to us, because we'd love to get our books out much further abroad.
Thank you so much. It was great to meet you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Simone.
Thanks so much for having me. I've loved having a chat with you guys.
Thank you for joining us on Barnyard Language. If you enjoy the show, please support us on Patreon with a donation.
Big thanks go out to our show editor, Krista Paffrath at the Rural Podcast Network.
Please rate and review the podcast wherever you listen, and follow the show so you never miss an episode.
If you want to connect with other farming families, join the private Barnyard Language Facebook group.
We are always in search of future guests for the podcast. If you or someone you know would like to chat with us, get in touch.